But I'm sure you also do know that the nation began a consultative dialogue on mining. Started yesterday. The president called for it. He had indicated same in the State of the Nation address, and he called for it yesterday. The Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Samuel Abu-Jinapor, had spearheaded that. So it happened yesterday. It's continuing today to wrap up today. We want to have our own dialogue here on TV3 because we've been at this for a very, very long time. And I have two gentlemen in the studio who are passionate about all of this conversation. Dr. Eric Chum is the CEO of the Institute of Environmental Assessment. He's in studio with me. And Darrell Busu is also a forest and climate change lover, enthusiast. He is with Rocha Ghana. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much. How are you doing?
Thank you.
Good to see you. Darrell, I haven't seen you in a while.
Yes. I hope you are great.
I'm fine. Doc, you too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. First of all, what would be your initial thoughts about the dialogue that's happening presently?
I think it's long overdue. This should have started right from the initial stages where government took up the big task of addressing issues about small-scale mining in the country. And the issue about stakeholder engagement should have been at the very heart of the discussion so they could get the buy-in of the citizenry into the policy. So it's a step in the right direction. Arguments have been made about it being not cost-effective, but I'm sure with the documentation that addresses key milestones and monitoring and evaluation of the effort by government, we should be able to come to some consensus.
I see.
The big question has been who was selected,
right?
What are the contribution to our national development, and how effective this will be. That's the question that we are selected. Have we addressed all the concerns of the players within the value chain? Were they there? Do we get their views? And was it an information session to inform them, or to really have a consultative meeting where we come and start with a plain sheet?
Okay.
We plan.
There's nothing on the sheet.
Nothing.
Everybody putting something.
So let us discuss and then come to a consensus. That is something we expect from government.
Okay. I do know that there are all the ministers of lands and natural resources under the Fourth Republic at least are there. I also know that the heads of the security agencies are there. I know that there are regional ministers who are there, members of the Council of State are there. I do know that the CSOs are there. And I do know that other representations are there. So if you will, this is the crux of it. Religious leaders, chiefs as well, opinion leaders. That is the composition of what we have there now. Fair?
I think it's a fair representation, but there are a number of key actors that are missing, and one of the key are the financiers. Who are the people providing the financing for it? It has been one of the big issues about small-scale mining. That's why we have a lot of foreign investors coming into the country to actually undertake this activity. 49 to 50% of the people involved in artisanal farming are women. Are women representation in there? So there has to be a bigger thinking as to the selection of the stakeholder engagement.
Right. Darrell, your initial thoughts as well. I'm sure you've been monitoring.
Yes, I might have quite a different perspective.
Sure.
Because I think that, yes, this dialogue, as we have always been saying, yes, I appreciate the fact that people make that it's long overdue, but I also think that we have been speaking to these galamsey issues and been having dialogue for a long time. Maybe we'll give the government the benefit of the doubt because you start a whole project management cycle, you go through everything, it doesn't work, so you want to start all over again. This is where we are coming from. But the good thing about this particular process is that we know the issues. It's just a matter of making sure that the issues that has been identified in the last 4 years, we actually flag them, put them on the table, and ask ourselves, how do we address these challenges that has made us not to make progress? For me, that's what I'm expecting this dialogue to give us. And so far, from yesterday's proceedings and what happened, I see we're still sharing a lot of information that we already know. We need to really zoom in and make sure that, look, there are challenges with the legal framework, the compliance and enforcement. How do we deal with those challenges? We know what the issues were. How do we deal with them? There are issues with environmental safeguards. How do we address those? There are issues with permitting and licensing. What are the solutions? These solutions should then be vetted by the composition of the stakeholders you see at the table now. So for me, I actually am looking forward to something more very concrete, direct, because I have to say, I have very little confidence leaving this dialogue and still leaving a lot of work to be done by the people at the ministry. Because we've gone through this before. We had the interministerial committee. They did all the work. And even for that committee, we always raised the point that there was a clear absence of civil society and some other groups. So if you have this platform, let's do the work here. Let's not take some of the work home and say, okay, we are going to wrap up and then bring it back to you. There's possibility of diluting the issue. So for me, I think that let's delve deep. So far, it's just, let's see how today will go. And I hope that we are able to bring out, we are able to actually put down on paper the issues that we really need to address.
So my colleague Mercy Darling-Loko was at the fora yesterday with Sarah Paku as well. They were representing Media General, bringing you all the tidbits like we did earlier. Dr. Steve Mantia is very well known, having been a champion against, having galamsey destroy our environment and all of that. He spoke with Mercy Darling-Loko. Take a listen quickly. When we come back, we'll do an assessment of the successes and the shortcomings, and then maybe we'll look whether we have enough laws to deal with it, because at that dialogue yesterday, talks about law, enforcing it, blah, blah, blah. But first, take a look at Dr. Steve Mantia.
Disappointed because of the monies we've wasted on holding consultative forums such as this. We spent an awful lot of money organizing some public consultations in Takwa on a program that was dubbed MMIP. And we didn't see much coming out of that consultative forum. Then it transitioned into the ASM formalization program. Again, we haven't seen much of the ASM formalization program. And then we introduced a new consultative dialogue into the framework. I mean, it gets a bit confusing, and it creates the impression that we're really not committed in dealing with the problem. Almost everybody who had a role to play in stemming illegalities in the mining sector were themselves players in the sector. They were themselves people who actually were involved in the illegalities. And as a result of that, it was difficult, really, to hold people to account. Now, I consider that the president is the person with the ultimate power and authority in this country. And until he demonstrates that he has a political will to deal with highly placed people in his government and his party who get involved in illegal mining, won't go anywhere.
Steve Mantia out there. Doc, I'll start with you. Is there confusion regarding the kind of commitment we need, the willpower? Is faulting the president, says the president has to act to show us that he's committed. Are we committed?
I think no matter who dealt with this, since independence, we have several presidents who have come in and gone. The issue about artisanal small-scale mining is very complicated. And so the difficulties we are facing currently are very normal and natural. What we had called for in the past, and even the present, is the political will.
Right.
And we had the president who put his presidency online. We are told from unofficial sources that it nearly cost him a number of parliamentary seats. And these are very hard, tough decisions that we need. So in terms of political will, I think we do have it currently. The problem has to do with ensuring that there's compliance with the regulations that we have. Because there are a number of key things that need to be addressed. Because this opportunity to address galamsey was a reset button for the country. Let us think about how we can do things differently. Address key issues such as land acquisition. Address the issue about permitting. How do we ensure people go through a due process and get the permits? How do we ensure the alternative livelihoods for individuals that are involved in this business? So it called for a rethinking, a whole national thinking. And what was missing is getting the citizenry to buy into the vision of the government.
One would say, well, the citizenry bought into it. Everybody was talking about it. The press were talking about it. There was a CSO, they were talking about it. Kenashibi and Steam. Everybody was talking about it. When we saw the color of the water change, we were happy. Daryl and I have had conversations. Alfred as well went into the bush with him. We saw it and we were all happy. Then suddenly the water started turning brown again. And the commitment faded away. How do you propose that the government wins back this commitment?
That's a very important question. We need to have a rethink about the whole sector and what we need to be done. For instance, let me speak the language of the man on the street. Man must live.
Right.
So people, livelihoods were affected. Did we provide incentives for those who are in the business to be able to survive whilst we had a research session, ensuring that the permitting system was done? Those who actually faltered went through the legal system, and we had examples of people who did not comply, and the legal system took its own course. Unfortunately, we didn't see that strong a force in there. So people went back to do the same old things they were doing, and that is why we are where we are. So I agree with that. That we need to have a real systems thinking, something different, and so this consultation program will produce results.
Darryl, when it comes to alternatives, the government, I mean the Akufo-Addo-led government says, look, I'm going hard at galamsey and we must stop it. Even though I believe that mining itself is not a bad thing, but we must regularize it. But in doing so, I want to have a situation where we can have one district, one factory, one village, one dam to promote agriculture, district, one factory to promote industrialization, planting for food and jobs, rearing for food and export, and all the other initiatives. These were the alternatives, and even the National Builders Corps, to be able to, if you like, harness the energies of those who would have left the galamsey sites and redirect their energies for national development. What would be your own assessment vis-a-vis these initiatives and where we are now with our galamsey fight?
Yes, so these initiatives, as you mentioned, for me are great because it brings the necessary, I would say, optional opportunities for communities, for value addition to the crops that are produced at the local level. Because if you look at most of these people, a lot of Ghanaians are mostly farmers first. And they depend on the land so much. And over time, they've complained about issues of post-harvest losses, low yields and all of that. So if you bring in any support and innovation to up the yield game and also try to make sure that there's value addition, this is where people are being employed. For example, if you look at landscapes that are producing a lot of cocoa, if you have cocoa processing facilities there, that is going to be the kind of aspiration for young people to make sure, look, I want to go and work in a cocoa factory. I want to go and be doing some value addition for maybe the waste coming from the cocoa. So these are great. And we have seen that in most places, these programs are being rolled out. But it has not also come at the pace that it has been expected. But that said, I still need to say that the whole idea of we must eat, yes, is a very basic human necessity that we all express. But we need to also balance that particular need and expression with how is that need to eat going to affect the need to eat for others as well.
Okay.
Because the fact that you must eat doesn't give you the right to do anything you want without recourse to existing laws. And so for me, yes, I always like that. I always don't seem to be very comfortable where we want to say people are doing galamsey because they don't have livelihood, and until we get them a commensurate livelihood, we have no cause to speak about the evils that they are doing. That for me shouldn't be the case. Galamsey as an enterprise should be dealt with as it is, and the government works on addressing the systematic challenges with making sure that there's livelihood opportunities for every Ghanaian. It doesn't matter your age, it doesn't matter your gender. And these are the aspects that I think we should be looking at holistically, but not give certain type of enterprises more value over other type. Because tell me, this galamsey happens in a place where people are also farming.
Right.
Other people also having their livelihood.
That's right.
So how do you balance that? Is galamsey more valuable than the person who is doing farming? No.
In fact, the farmlands now, we're told, are yielding, the farmers are yielding their lands for galamsey because they get money up front. You spoke about post-harvest losses and all of that. They get money up front. We're also suffering, farmlands are suffering the weight of real estate development. But I know you're passionate about planting trees and maintaining the environment, the ecosystem, the river bodies and all of that. Galamsey destroys a lot. And let me say good morning to Nanaya Odakwa and his Green Republic team. they planted a lot of trees. They intend to plant some more. How do we go about it such that in trying to stop galamsey, we are planting the trees, we are keeping the ecosystem, and we are keeping global warming away? How do we do it?
Okay, so to address that, I think that there needs, first of all, to be a national, I would say, boundaries.
Okay.
We need, as a country, to set boundaries and say that, look, you want to do galamsey, fair enough, but there are certain areas in this country that are off limits to you. And then let's look at a land use planning system that clearly makes sure that these boundaries are respected when even allocating mining concessions.
Okay.
You have a situation where you go on the ground and there are mining concessions really, even in an area that is a wetland. And you ask yourself, how is this possible? So I'll give you a very good example. If you take the Atua Forest, for example, all around the Atua Forest are mining concessions. So that forest is an island sitting in a minefield. So that's why I think that to even begin the discussion of whether we plant trees or not, we need to have clear boundaries. And when we're also giving concessions, we need to respect these boundaries. You don't give a concession to a miner to go to an area where we know is a wetland or is a watershed, and then later on ask Water Resources Commission, EPA, to go and verify if the person is affected, do any activity to impact the water negatively. The boundaries are important. If you set the boundaries and we make sure that certain areas are off limit, then with the miners, we'll make sure even before they get to start work, they are made to post bonds that will commit them to full reclamation of the lands.
Okay.
At the moment, we have this policy only for large-scale miners, where large-scale miners post bonds. And that is how come, if you look at the large-scale mining sector, they are largely responsible for certain rehabilitation activities. But for the miners, they know they can dig tonight. They dig tonight, in the morning you see them there working, and then by the next dawn, they are gone because there's nothing holding them together.
Nothing like reclamation of the land?
No, they are not. They are not really posted anymore. They have to submit a plan to show that they will do it, but nothing really says that they put something down and say, if I don't do it, you can use that.
My bond to
And this, for me, should be integral. We need to be proactive with reclamation, with regeneration of the land, even before we come to talk about let's plant trees.
Okay. So, Doc, and I would like to continue from where it's ended. We have a national tree planting program. Okay, we have youth in afforestation. We have employed them, they are planting trees. But are we planting right?
Yes,
When we're digging everywhere, we're planting trees. What are we doing?
No, the issue is we have regulations and commitments, both international and local, that indicates we need to plant 10,000 hectares of trees every year. Now, we are making good progress with it. And depending on the area you find yourself, with defined boundaries, we need to be able to plant the trees because of obvious reasons. Climate change issues, carbon sequestration. There are issues that are of concern globally. And as a country, we can even see the changes in our weather patterns. And we are told, of course, with something called ecosystem services that come with planting of trees. There are a lot of restorative activities that the trees provide for us. Same with our cocoa. Agroforestry is an essential part of cocoa production, and it is needed to ensure our productivity and development as a country. So yes, I think we are doing something right. In fact, we are exceeding what we are expected to plant, but unfortunately, we are cutting more trees than we expected. In other words, we are planting more, but we are also destroying our forest at a rate which is not sustainable. And that is what needs to be checked.
Nana Dakwa, for example, Green Republic, they have a plan to plant 20 million trees by 2030. So they are working assiduously at it. Are they working for good or they are working in vain? Because with all the digging happening, they plant the trees, and then, like Darrell says, there are no boundaries. Everybody is just digging to find gold, diamond, bauxite, and back to square one. How do we encourage people like him and others who want to plant to preserve the environment not to give up?
That's a very important point. All this calls for regulation. You just do not plant trees anywhere it has to be properly demarcated and in line with the regulatory authorities. We have Act 490 that deals with the Environment Protection Agency. We have Act 571 from the Forestry Commission. All these are meant to guide and provide us with some sense of direction as to what we do. Because when you get into the technical details of tree planting, there are several ways, several means, several species that are required that could be used for various reasons. And so it calls for liaising with the rightful regulatory authorities in ensuring that we are meeting the targets that we are going. But I think the work done by the gentleman and the team is fantastic. They should be encouraged and given all the support that they need to be able to plant more trees for the country.
Do we have enough laws to stop galamsey? Because yesterday at the dialogue, it was on the table that we will enforce the laws, we'll enforce the laws, we'll enforce the laws. Do we have enough laws?
We do have laws. The problem has been implementation.
Whose fault is that?
Remember, the whole idea of galamsey small-scale mining was seen as an informal sector. Now, what the government is doing is to formalize the sector, bring checks and balances into the system. And then in formalizing the sector, it requires a lot of work. That it has a central theme of a human-centered development. That first addresses issues about equity, land issues, social justice, implementation of laws, making sure that the corporates are brought to book. And the most important is to have people to collaborate, work together, and be able to participate in the process. This is what we are doing, formalizing the informal sector. And that is going to take time, but the good thing is it's a process that, again, is long overdue, but there is some hope that with the implementation of all the laws that we have and formalizing the sector, we should be able to make good progress with our fight on galamsey.
On a scale of 0 to 100, how much hope do you have?
I would say 70%.
70%. That's good. Daryl, how much hope do you have?
I'll wait. But at the moment, giving the government benefit of that, let's peg it at 50.
Okay. So
I will want to see how government takes some of the solutions that are preferred on the at the dialogue today forward. Let's do that before we actually look at scaling them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's also the question of politicization and or streetchism, as I like to call it. The president mentioned it. Mr. Jinapo mentioned it. Steve Mantia mentioned it. You have mentioned it. You have mentioned it. Everybody keeps talking about it. So we are not ignorant of the fact that there's politicization happening there.
Yeah.
How do we solve it, given the fact that the people who must call the shots are politicians who have political friends, who have an interest in the mining concessions, and who will come back to come and tell us that we are working at it. But in actual fact, they are the very people who are being pointed at to be the perpetrators. How do we stop the politicization?
I think we begin by first allowing the rule of law to exist. I mentioned that the theme for this action is on human-centered development.
Right.
That focuses on social justice. We need to allow the regulatory organizations to do their job. The EPAs, the Forestry Commission, the Geological Services, they all need to be allowed to do their job. These are civil service institutions devoid of politics. Once we allow the civil service to do their job, then, of course, we take away the politics out.
They are headed by politicians,
Yeah.
political appointees.
That is true. But we should allow the rule of law to take its own course without allowing the civil service and the regulatory institution to do their job. We may not be making good progress. So lessons have been learned. We have previous governments and current governments facing the same challenge. So the question is, what do we do differently? We should allow the system to work.
Daryl.
Yes, I think this also boils down to strengthening our institutions. I mean, I agree with Doc when he talks about allowing the rule of law. For me, if you look at the Minerals Commission, which is the main institution to regulate and even give concessions and all of that, we need to empower them. I mean, going forward, we shouldn't expect anything like Vanguard anymore. All the resources that was given to Vanguard in the last 4 years, government should look at committing the same resources to the Minerals Commission, to the EP and the Water Resources Commission to ensure that they revamp their institutions. Because like Doc said, there's already a clear policy and legal framework as to how these organizations should work. When it comes to permitting, when it comes to regulation and monitoring, all of this is in place. And then we should also be able to apply other sectorial issues like conflicts of interest, where politicians are seen bringing concession applications to somebody at the Minerals Commission or the EPA and say, look, work on this for me.
Right.
We need to be addressing these issues. And we also need to be addressing issues at the local government sector where DCs and all these people know about illegal activities but are not even working with the police to address them. So this is how deep it goes. And I think that if you are going to allow the institutions to work, there's times where if you go to some of the district, issues are happening, there's clear violations going on, but the police can't take action because somebody, a chief, it could be somebody at the district assembly has said, please stay away, these are my boys. And this is basically what happens in most people. So if you allow the institutions to work per the existing regulation, then we can make progress. And I know that is a very difficult thing to do, because looking at a system where the president appoints CEOs and chief directors of these key institutions, that is a problem. And this is where discipline is really important. If really we are committed to separation of powers and allowing institutions to work, this is where it should begin.
Let's look at our efforts so far. Operation Vanguard, it had military, it had the police, it had the immigration guys, it had 4 ministers, Professor Kobina Frimpong-Boateng, very respected scientist, cardiothoracic expert. It had John Peter Mewu, at the time was Lands Minister. It had Ambrose Derry, our Interior Minister, Dominic Nitiwo, plus others who came to join to make it. We gave them everything they deserved. But one striking thing that we picked from on the ground, and I'm sure your documentary that you did with Alfred also picked, was that they felt that there's a certain detachment from those coming either from Accra or Kumasi and coming in there without that proper liaison with the local security, even though the DCE is the boss of the district security organization. Is it time that we yoked them together so that command can actually be given to the DCE and then he will be held accountable if anything goes wrong, as opposed to having Operation Vanguard operating from Accra and breathing down their necks and asking them to do the right thing?
John, I think that if you look at Operation Vanguard, the work they were doing, I think for a time it was very relevant and very needed. But it gets to, I would say, another time, their work should phase out. They came in at a time where galamsey was getting out of hand. We needed to really take an immediate action to halt it. So when they came in, they should have immediately pulled out and make sure they hand over to the state institutions. So for me, I am not looking at the situation where Vanguard is deployed again. Let's take the opportunity now to make sure that the institutions work once again. I have to say, I'm saying once again because I've been around for quite a while, and I know that a decade ago, galamsey was not out of hand as it is now. Something was working before. Then all of a sudden, it gets out of hand because the politicians started with youth in mining. I remember the NDC time. They started it somewhere in the eastern region, and it continued. It became a menace, and then it went on. By 2016, it was really getting out of hand. 2017, we expected really action to stop this, and we couldn't do that. So for me, Vanguard's time has passed. It came at a time when it was most needed to address an issue for the government to also put in the necessary mechanism. So now, at this point, I think it's time for the state institution to take over. The police, the Minerals Commission, they are all decentralized institutions. We should make them work once again and let the military play their role also in another sense, but not at this point. I think at this point, they should take a rest.
Doc, what do you say? Should we bring Vanguard back, or should we stop Vanguard, or should we just ignore them, allow the local institutions to deal with the matter?
I think on the same issue of politicization and all that, exactly. We should allow the institutions to do their job. I agree with Daryl. We need to find, there's a mandate of the Operation Vanguard and all that. I think that has come to an end. We need to find a way to empower our institutions and be able to look at a bigger picture of the issue. Because, you see, the problem we have is that the small-scale sector employs about 1 million people. Now, if you take an average household of 4 or 5, it means 4.5 million Ghanaians depend on artisanal mining for their survival.
I see.
And this is what needs to be addressed. Once we're able to address this basic issue about livelihoods and ensure that this sector is properly formalized with due diligence in place, there are sectors performing their duties, they are regulating the system, then we can make progress. But until we are able to regularize and regulate the system and ensure that the institutions that are supposed to be working are doing their job, we will not be going anywhere.
Because you talk about the livelihood, I would like to bring in the health aspect. Our water is heavily polluted with silts, there's mercury, champagne is here, excavator there, lead is there, and we even read that at some point our exports of cocoa and other stuff were rejected because it had those metals in them. Has it not beaten us so hard, like you're saying, for us to allow the institutions to work? Because yesterday the president said it, the minister said it, everybody is saying the same thing, but who must act first? Who must lead the charge to make the institutions work? Who?
That's a very, very good one. I'm happy you talked about a few, they're not referred to as heavy metals. They have serious implications on our health, premature abortions, premature deaths, and a lot of blood clotting issues that are related, health-related matter in terms of this. Within our local system, we have districts that are supposed to supervise and lead this regulatory system, like the Environmental Protection Agency within all the districts that we have in the country. We also have other institutions, that regulatory institutions that go around ensuring that these menace is resolved. What we have not been able to do is to have a proper coordinating mechanism.
Okay.
Where we need coordination within the district level to be able to address this issue. And so there's always competition and fight between ministries, institutions that are supposed to be working together. So we need to help with the coordination within the district levels, national levels, regional levels, so that we're able to speak the same language and be on the same side. But if there's division and there are concerns, unfortunately, within these ministries and districts and authorities, then of course it provides a leeway for the galamseyers to have their way.
Can this be done in 4 years, Mr. Jinapor being at the helm of affairs? Can he do it?
I think
the weight of work.
I think that's a very difficult question and something to answer. What can be done is we need to have a continuous process of discussion, engagement, and then creating the awareness, and then people buying into the system. There's a level and a limit to which, as an individual or as a government, they can do. We need the citizenry to take up the mantle and run with it. We need to see that this is our nation, this is our country. What we are doing is not only affecting our generation, but future generations will also be affected. So we need people to buy into the vision and understand that I'm getting to galamsey not because I need the money, or I have all the tools, all the requirements, and I'm doing it the right way. So it is doing the right thing the right way. That is the challenge.
That is the challenge. Darryl, let's look at the roadmap, because the government intends to have a blueprint and look at best standards or best practices and what we can do going forward. The dialogue ends today, but after the dialogue, what's next?
Yes, so I think, as you said, the blueprint. What form is it going to take?
Right.
Are we going to still leave it in the broad strokes? Because as I indicated, we know exactly what the issues are. If you come to the compliance and enforcement, we know that Minerals Commission gives out the permit. They allow people to go to the field. Monitoring is happening. But when these people infringe upon some of their rights and allocations, nobody is able to take them on. When people are arrested, some people are interfering, all of that. These are the issues. So we need to be asking the difficult questions as to how do we weed out political involvement and political interference. So the blueprint needs to be very specific, not hover within the broad strokes. And I think for me, that is where it is important. And that determination, getting the blueprint also should be done at this dialogue. Like I said, we would come out of this dialogue with taking contributions from people and all of that, and then we set up a small group of people to go and sit there and say, okay, put it together. I'm concerned about how inclusive that process was.
Okay.
We saw how the interministerial committee was working, and there was no representation, broad representation of most of the stakeholders in the sector. And so for me, this should change. Even this group that's going to come out the blueprint, we need to make sure that every relevant stakeholder is at the table and making sure that the views are respected. We shouldn't have a situation where we go and we have a late capture still of the process. Because we are where we are now because of too much involvement of the politicians. The institutions have their regulation, they have their policies. It's been working. How do we make sure that it works once again? And that starts with day stay now. So whatever we are going to propose, we need to let the politicians know that this time you need to take a seat back and watch the institutions do their job. That is the only way you can really show commitment. Because like you said, Johnny, I've heard the president talk about it. Anytime he talks about it, I say hallelujah, because the way he talks about it, the passion you see in him is not reflecting in the actions on the ground. So I think if there's anything we have to give for this dialogue, and that should be that, look, nothing should remain the same.
Well, I think so. Doc, so you have heard the president talk about consensus building. You have also heard him talk about the fact that we need to recognize that this is ours and future generations will blame us. You have also heard him talk about the fact that let one side not politicize this in the bushes while one side tries to work at it on the bigger platform on a national scale. What will be your blueprint if you're giving a plain sheet of paper like you have now and a pen? What will be your blueprint?
My proposal would be to have an opportunity to have a continuous engagement. For instance, the environment in which the engagement is being held shouldn't be coercive. It should be an opportunity where we can have everybody speak. Are we engaging people involved with us in their local language? And not just an opportunity, a talk shop with big technical language that people simply don't understand. Another thing we should want to see in there are key milestones that we expect within the next 6 months, the next 1 year. How do we measure the progress and the success of all this implementation?
Right.
Monitoring and evaluation, extremely important. And then we could make changes as we get along. Because we have one in a lifetime opportunity to stop this menace, and we should not miss out on opportunity simply because we politicize this. It is something which provides us the chance to have a national dialogue, national decision making, and get everybody around the table to participate in this whole process and planning.
Darryl, that's your camera. 30 seconds for you. The world is watching. I'm sure the big players are watching. What would you say to them?
Yes, so we know the areas where we are found wanting. Compliance and enforcement, permitting and licensing, environmental safeguards, and even the business around. And also for me, what I've seen is important is that the communication of the benefit of mining. We need to start prioritizing and give full cost responsibility to the miners as well. So whilst we are going down to really firm up the decisions, let's really deal with the challenges within the enforcement and compliance system. Let's deal with the permitting challenges. Let's deal with the environmental safeguards. We have not prioritized that. And we need to make sure that miners are also fully responsible. If they degrade an area, if they decimate an area, they need to pay full cost. And I say that if miners are made to see that they have to pay, mining will not be that lucrative. You realize that farming is even more lucrative than gold mining.
I see. Doctor, that's your camera. You're a speaker at the dialogue. What would you say to the state?
We should address 6 key issues. The first has to do with issue about land acquisition, permitting system of land acquisition. We should look at the issue about funding for the mining sector. Are we able to get the right people, the financing mechanisms to address whatever we have in there. The other thing has to do with the regularization and permitting process. We have a system that we follow, which is not too bureaucratic. We have set up offices in district regional offices to ensure that the right people get a permit to do what is expected. We also need to look at key issues about livelihoods. How alternative livelihood provisions have we done to address some of these issues? And then the whole permitting process, how transparent they are. One of the key things we should not miss is the opportunity to always be reminded, continuous engagement and education strategy that will educate the Ghanaian in their local language, the means of participation.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time. I've learned a lot, and I trust you have learned a lot as well. Daryl Busu is an environmentalist. He's also a change lover, and he's been going round, and I know his voice has been very, very deep on the Tiwa Forest and all of that. We'll invite him and talk to him in future about the Tiwa Forest and the bauxite and all of it, and the zoning and all of it. But he's with Rocha Ghana. Thank you very much, Daryl, for coming. Also, Dr. Chum is a CEO of the Institute of Environmental Assessment. He's a chartered environmentalist. Doc, thank you very much, as always, for coming.